Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to Mindgasms. Doing another chat right away here. Check out the one that we just did on our predictions of what will happen in Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. And of course, we've got Mask AKA Tristram Johnson back here, and Dusty Cubes AKA Shady Centrist AKA Dustin Cubit, my fellow nerd friends. And we're going to nerd out this time about Shadows for Silence in the Forests of Hell, which is a short story in Brandon Sanderson's Arcanum Unbounded collection of short stories that takes place in his fantasy Cosmere universe. And check out the last one we did on Emperor's Soul, which is also in the same Arcanum Unbounded collection. And like Emperor's Soul, this story, Shadows for Silence in the Forest of Hell, takes place on its own individual planet within the Cosmere and has its own unique magic system. And it's basically about the main character named Silence, who is she is a bounty hunter in order to protect her family from a gang of other killers. And basically, the premise is that she goes into this dark, enchanted forest, which is really cool because you have to, uh, you can't spill blood or light a flame or make too much noise, or what are basically these ghosts will attack and kill you, which is really cool. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention I'm Andrew slash Ghost Mindgasms, and so yeah, as I know, you are like Brandon Sanderson's your favorite author, and you know more about the Cosmere than both of us probably, Tristram. So why don't we start off by saying, what do you think about this story in general and in comparison to Emperor's Soul? I know Emperor's Soul is your favorite.
Oh, it is. It absolutely is. But the thing that's really interesting for me about this story is one, it takes place on Threnody, and we have very little from that planet. This is like the only thing we really have. And so this is our first opportunity to look at the impact of the Shard ambition. And one of the things that's really interesting is the people here are not very Cosmere aware. Okay. So if you read this book, you could not be aware of the Cosmere at all, and there'd be no problem. Okay. Because
Right.
they're not aware. And so that's really, really interesting. Though Brandon Sanderson has suggested that one day he'd love to do a follow up, not necessarily a direct sequel, but a follow up on this place and introduce an organization that is Cosmere aware, but we're not sure how that would work. So what I love about
Oh,
this
interesting.
story, yeah, like the Children of the Dusk. Anyway, doesn't matter. Not relevant to this story. The key thing that I love about this story is one, it's Brandon Sanderson doing horror, or at least edging on horror. Brandon Sanderson
Yeah,
level,
it's
not
fantasy
Stephen King
horror.
level.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's fantasy horror for sure, for sure. But I like it because it allows him to play with some elements that I think are really, really interesting. For example, there's no massive warscape where hundreds of people are fighting hundreds of other people and there's skyscraper tall colossi. Nothing like that. It's all very personal, very detailed, very much man on man or woman on man as it is in this case. And I love that. I think that's really it makes it feel really tense, and it still feels like the stakes are super high because they feel so personal. And I think that's a great choice for that kind of edgy, um, dark feeling. I love the atmosphere of this book. Threnody itself as a planet is a place that is very, very dark. And one of the things that he's done here as well is combined it with something like a frontier tale, okay? Out there against the unknown. Like they're literally at the very forefront. Like her surname is Forescout because her family are like literally pioneers. And that's something that in many ways in our current timeline we've lost. Like we've explored the whole world now. There's like there doesn't feel like there's any frontier anymore. There's nowhere where you can go and just find the unknown, which might explain why an increased love of sci-fi. That idea of the last unknown is space. And but the cool thing is in this world that isn't the case. Like they are right on the border of the unknown. There's very few places that are established, and it has for those who've read Peter V. Brett, it has the Demon Cycle. It's got a little bit of that kind of feel. That there's these sort of outposts of humanity and civilization, but the vast majority of the place is just overrun with these dark shades, and that is really really cool to me. Love the fact that the magic is so limited. Love the fact that it's got this frontier feel and this very personal horror vibe. So that's what I get specifically from this story, above and beyond any of the others he's written.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. That's one of the reasons that it's my favorite story in the collection is because I love horror, and fantasy horror and sci-fi horror are probably my two favorite genres. So this being a fantasy horror is really cool, and how he integrates ghosts and how you have to follow these rules in the evil enchanted forest is it's a pretty common fantasy trope, but it's common because it works so well, and I love that trope itself. So what about you, Dusty? What do you think about this story in particular, in comparison to Emperor's Soul? And I forgot to ask you this, Tristram, too, and also in comparison to Six of the Dusk.
Are you asking me about
Yeah,
comparing
yeah.
it to Sixth? Oh, okay. Well, of course, I
And
thought
Emperor's Soul. Yeah.
Sixth was number one for me. That was my pick here. Emperor's Soul, it was basically it's just second by default because of its because of the actual what I want to call the near perfect nature of it. I just have to put it at second. It's just kind of a masterpiece level thing. I know what I like isn't a masterpiece, but I like it.
Right.
So I just kind of put Emperor Soul Default at second because it is a masterpiece. I don't know really what to say about it outside of that. And because we had that default situation at second, this story ends up as third of the three. Doesn't mean I don't like it. It's great. I've read it a couple of different times. I think what I like most about this one is the frontier aspect. It really does remind me of werewolves and vampires uh, and things of that nature. I think most of it revolving around silver. So if I were to go into something that I like video games wise, I really do like survival horror type of video games. And this is a survival horror story because
Yeah.
she, like, her little place, economically are on a very far downturn. And in order to survive, they need funds
Mm-hmm.
to at least have silver. Because if you don't have silver, uh, you're pretty much dead in the water.
Yeah,
And it's
that's a really cool aspect too that I love about this. How she's a ghost hunter. She's like Van Helsing except for ghosts.
well, I wouldn't call her a ghost hunter. She's just
Yeah,
She's
that's
Van
true. Yeah.
Helsing knowledgeable about the ghosts and shades, but she's particularly since she's on the frontier. Criminals tend to love to hide out there, and
Hmm.
she goes after these criminals to supplement her income. And it's almost as if it's not even supplemental. In this case, it seems like this is what keeps her afloat. So she has to go after these criminals, and in this case, it's not just a job. There's also some sentimental and revenge issues here when she goes
Right.
after the particular criminals that she goes after this time. So there's that layer on top of that, and all the danger that's involved with hunting these criminals. Like at first, we see that she's doing a pretty good job, but you can't plan for everything. You know, one little thing happens, and there's a cascade effect that can
Yeah.
totally poo-poo your plans, and then you
Yeah.
gotta kind of have to react from then on out.
Yeah, I love that. It's so cool. The like how she's protecting her family, that's such a great motivation, which again is used so often because it works so well. And that's so cool. Like my favorite part is when she's in the enchanted forest and she has to kill these guys without defying the rules that makes the ghosts attack you. So she has to do things like wrap a shirt over this guy to strangle him to death without spilling blood. And then if any of them scream while she's killing them, then they get attacked by the ghosts, and she has to just like grunt her pain away when she gets attacked or injured, so the ghosts don't attack her while she's trying to kill the guy who's trying to kill her. And yeah, like just that scene where she's getting her weapons ready, and she's got to get the crossbow bolts, like you were talking about, Dusty, how she has to spend some of her limited funds on the silver so that she can still be able to kill the ghosts if she has to. There's so many interesting things going on.
Yeah, because silver kills the ghosts, it protects them, it also heals from the ghost's effects. So everything revolving around these shades, it seems like silver is a necessity not only to protect yourself from harm, but you have to use it offensively as well as to heal. So it's kind of the lifeblood of this frontier area where they're surrounded by these shades. Like it's probably like just as essential as shelter and food.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so you mentioned the magic system, or like what it tells you about it, Tristram. I didn't even think about that before because it's just such an interesting story. But yeah, they don't really tell you anything directly about the magic system or anything like that, right?
No, absolutely not. But and the thing is, I think that's deliberate, because one of the things that Brandon loves to do in his books is you to learn the magic system as you see it being used, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like, so for example, if you think Mistborn, we see Vin sort of stumbling around with it, and then she meets a master magic user who's like, by the way, kid, this is how it really works. And you go, oh, and then you find out that he only understood some of it. And you're like, oh, there's so much more and so much more. One of the things we see in this world is the magic system on its extremely base level is known by almost everyone, but
Mm-hmm.
that's such a tiny level, and it's more of like how you might pass on myths to your kids than like you know stay on the path if you go into a forest. Don't follow the strange lights. It's that kind of stuff. You're like, that's not a magic system. But the point is that here it is. These three simple rules are actually a real thing, and the ghosts are real, and everyone knows they're real. And the reason we live in one city called the Fort and a couple of outposts is because it's real. And if you don't respect it, you die. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that, so like the three simple rules are: do not kindle a flame, do not shed the blood of another, do not run during the night. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things we find
Oh
is,
yeah, I forgot that third rule. Yeah.
and one of the things is that these are, interestingly, like these are kind of similar to what Jews wouldn't do on the Sabbath. Yeah,
Oh
like
right,
you
yeah.
you weren't meant to do it. You weren't meant to work on the Sabbath, right? That whole idea
Mm-hmm.
of it's the holy day, but they took it to the nth degree. Like, so like not shedding blood, like they wouldn't even like kill an animal to eat it. So if you wanted to prepare your food, you had to prepare it the day before. You weren't allowed to prepare it on the Sabbath. You shouldn't run. Not only not work, you shouldn't even run or do anything particularly strenuous on the Sabbath. You shouldn't even like build a fire. So you should build your fire for the Sabbath the day before, so that you wouldn't have to work on the Sabbath, but you could still stay warm. Anyway, so just cool origin point.
Yeah, that's
Um,
interesting. I hadn't thought of that really before. That's an interesting comparison.
yeah, it was just no. It's Brandon said that gave him the idea. That's why I'm regurgitating it here.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Okay.
yeah, but it's just interesting. Just like, it's just the basic idea. It's not exact, but it's the basic idea. And so the thing is that not everyone takes it as seriously as Silence does, because if you live in the fort all the time, you never go out, you don't see it. But one of the things she's quite proud of is that she is a frontier gal, that she is out there in the darkness, and she wants to stay there. And one of the things I love about that is it represents this sort of independence. And I think there's people who feel that way, people who are wanting to live out, especially in America. I've found there's quite a lot of people who want to live, have their own house, be independent, be able to live off the grid, have their own food, be able to hunt if they need to, and like really feel a strong desire to protect that independence, to be able to say that if the government packed in, I'd still be able to feed my family. I'm going to grow my own food and all that kind of thing. And I've met some who are really, really dedicated to this idea of, I want to be totally my own person. And I feel that really is a vibe that we get with Silence, that she has been brought up by people who have been doers, who have been independent thinkers. And right now, it's the dream is getting hard. 'Cause it's easy to say that, but now it's getting tough because
Mhm.
she's struggling to make enough money. As the shades are getting worse, less people are coming out. As less people come out, she's getting less money. But the only way she gets anyone to come to her in is that she's known for being really careful. So she has 3 full rings of silver around her waist up, which does give it a good rep, but that's expensive. And
Yeah.
guess what? As there's more shades, she's having to replace it more often. As there's more shades, silver's going up in price because more people want it. And so she's running out of money. She's in debt. And this is a really good theme for almost a crime story. And this is, my goodness, he did a horror story, he did a frontier story, and he did a crime story all in one go. And we find out that like that's the sort of point at the beginning is that actually she knows how to stay safe from shades. So what is going to happen to make her be vulnerable? Because she's too smart, right? She's too smart. And one of the things I love about this character is she doesn't just go and do something stupid that puts her in danger. She is forced into the problem. And
Mhm.
so you totally respect Silence as this really smart woman who totally understands the rules. Because like when you read those fairy tales and they're like, don't go off the path to the strange house. And then the kids like go off the path to the strange house. And you're just like, you stupid idiot. Like, why in the world would you do that when he just told you not to do that? And like,
Yeah.
if anyone comes and offers you gold, or like you go into the magic cave, it's like, don't touch anything except the lamp. Okay, I won't. Simples. But the thing is here is that she's really forced. She can't just stay in her waist up because she's running out of money, and we find out she has a creditor who is going to take her for all she is worth, which will basically turn her into a working slave, basically. And she has a daughter she's trying to protect, and those of us who have family, that idea of you do anything for your family, you really want to look after them, support them, keep them safe. And so even though she's in this fantasy world, we can really sympathize with her. We know what it's like to have money pressure. We know what it's like to feel that we maybe can't support our families the way we'd want to. And we think, right, I get that. I get why she's so pressured. So she has to do risky stuff. And that is how she is a dangerous woman in a way that maybe people reading this story wouldn't have expected. When you read a story about dangerous women, you maybe think it'll be more like I don't know, Tifa Lockhart, someone who beats the crap out of people with their fists or has
Yeah.
superpowers. But instead, it's this ordinary woman who is extraordinary in what she's prepared to do to preserve her family and to preserve her livelihood.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's all really interesting. Like the theme of how she's doing all this to protect her family, and she's always financially struggling because being independent is harder than you would expect, because you might have gangs and bounty hunters around you already, and you might have to literally become a bounty hunter in order to protect your family and go into an enchanted forest and potentially get killed by ghosts. So it's not an easy life in
Yeah.
that way.
If she would give up her home and give up her craft and give up her independence and just go live in the fort like a peon, she could be fine. She could have a baseline job and just get along. But the thing is, Brandon's saying that's not okay. There's a lot of us like that, right? I could be fine if I just went and worked a 9 to 5 job packing boxes. It would destroy my soul, but I could do that. But the problem is that people reach for more because the human soul wants more, right? We want
Hmm.
to, be creative, have families, not just run around in a circle till we die. And that's the thing. Silence is like caught between a rock and a hard place, because having a family, independence, her own life, a little bit of money to get by on is not so much to ask. But for her to have that, she has to do the silver. If she's doing the silver, she needs money. If she needs money, that puts her in debt. It's not like she's in debt because she's an alcoholic. She's in debt to literally stay alive and survive. And so it's a vicious circle. And but the thing is, then the book shows, ooh, but maybe there's an out, because she's been forced into this life of being a bounty hunter, and it turns out she's quite good at it. And then what should happen? But the biggest bounty in town walks into her way stop. Oh, goody. But of course, as in every story, it's a two-edged sword, because her adopted daughter is adopted because all her family were wiped out by who? The biggest bounty around. So this is a huge paycheck, but it's a huge paycheck that murdered your adopted daughter's entire family.
Yeah.
Problem.
Yeah, that's a really interesting theme too. I love how, like you said, it's a double-edged sword, and the Sanderson is so good at integrating that into the level of story that's going on. Like from I didn't think about it from the angle that you just described too before, about you know you can be so drawn to trying to have an independent lifestyle because just conforming to what most people do, you can do it, but it would crush your soul. Like, I've definitely had that feeling myself plenty of times in life where I've just been working at shitty customer service jobs that I hate, where I can make money and well,
survive.
not quite make a living, but survive. But every day I go to work, I think, why am I doing this? Why am I here? This is so awful. I feel like I'm dying inside, like it's literally crushing my soul. So yeah, that can be super appealing. And yeah, with the bounty hunter is the super interesting situation too. And then because of all that, and integrated into having to protect her family simultaneously, of course, that's what causes her to, while being chased by a gang of other killers, go into the forest and have to kill them without breaking those laws of the forest, basically.
Yeah, because her bounty actually goes relatively well until the fort dwellers show up.
Yeah.
And steal her bounty, so to speak.
It's so cool though, isn't it? That like the way she does it, she uses the rules a little bit, because the reason they're all out there, like, and don't have like hardly any protection and can't possibly, is because they have to stop at her place, because she's the only one protected with silver. So she get them. They have to eat her food. So she puts the food in, poisons them, and it's just so clever, because she doesn't seem to have any crazy superpowers. She's just smart and careful and patient, and I love that. I love that in an anthology about dangerous women, that there's a woman in there that I'm like, I can absolutely believe that if the world existed like you described, that this could exist. That the things she does don't stretch my credulity at all. I'm like, yeah, you could absolutely do that. Whereas, if you have one person who whips out a sword and takes down 8 guys on his own, I'm always like, yeah, you see, yeah, I don't care if you are a swords master, you don't take down 8 guys. You just don't. Because they rush you and you die. But anyway, but this totally believable. And even though like she wasn't like like in Stormlight Archive, where someone runs along with a sword and just carves through 50 people, which is epic, right? But like when she just goes in and she strangles that guy, it is visceral. And
it is.
And
that's
dark.
the most memorable part of the entire story to me, because it's so visceral. The ghosts are swarming around her. She's struggling to quickly cover up his face so she can strangle him without spilling any blood, and she's trying to muffle his voice, and it's just conveys the emotion of what she's trying to do. And she's, like you said, she's so good at being calm under pressure too. And there's just so many interesting layers of what's going on there emotionally, which is what makes a character what a character is experiencing in a story so compelling.
Well
Mhm.
said. And like, like you hear like all these people dying in like this other book. It's like, yeah, Adeline just killed 8 guys. All right. And then you get here, one person dies, and I'm like, I feel it, right? I'm like,
Hmm.
wow. Like, and that was tough. And like you said, like tarring the sacks, because actually I can't just kill them. I have to kill them in a way the shades don't realize, otherwise we're all dead. So
Hmm.
it's like doing a duel, but like right on the edge of Niagara Falls. Like, let's hope we
Yeah.
don't both fall and die while we do this. Like, I have to beat you, but if we both
Mhm.
fall, it won't matter who won. And but
Yeah.
like Shady says, she's very clever, she's very patient, she's very exact, and actually it goes perfectly. Apart from the boss, she basically takes them all down, and then it gets a little bit scrappy at the end, but she is able to let him go and then track him down to get him. And so she's got him. She's got the thing. It's gone a little bit wrong. She's been a bit wounded. Her daughter went off a little bit half cocked, because there's also that coming of age part of this. My goodness, how many stories did he want to write in this one story? But like her daughter is like, I want to be you, and she's like, I don't think you're ready to be me yet. And she's like, yeah, but I wanna. And so she's like, okay, I'll take you on as my, like, you can have your apprentice turn. So it's that story as well. And then it's all gone well, and then this other bounty hunter group come up, and they're like, yep, so you got this for us, have you? And we know her anguish, right? She needs this in order to make ends meet. If she makes ends meet, she can avoid her creditor. It's all going to go wrong. These guys are not actually criminals. They are bounty hunters like her. And really, she's done all the hard work, but they're just going to steal it out from her. And you know what it made me think of? Indiana
Mm,
frickin' Jones and The Last Crusade, where he goes through
mm.
all that work, and then at the end, they're just like, give it here. And you're like, no, don't give it to him. But of course, he has to. And you're like, damn it, it's so unfair. And I think, again, that's a brilliant way that Brandon Sanderson has of taking something that's fantastical and then putting in it something that we can all relate to, where our work has
Mm.
been just undermined at the last minute and the credit or the prize is taken by another. And that gutted
Yeah.
feeling that you have. And like her daughter is super gutted that it's happened.
Yeah.
And then,
And
Mhm.
it can, and that's a great way too in this story. Brandon Sanderson demonstrates how great he is at showing how we can have this magic world where these supernatural things are happening, but show it in a gritty and realistic way without necessarily being full on grim dark fantasy horror like
yeah, which
Stephen
it
King,
isn't.
as you said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, one of the things I
So,
was going to mention too, like there were also some consequences that they really didn't speak about um,
mm,
directly. Like if you remember, nobody knew that she was this famous bounty hunter. Like she had kept her identity hidden. So just thinking about her being discovered by the fort people, that
mm,
had some major consequences because at that point, okay, if they know her identity, so if she had not disposed of all of them and turned in the bounty,
mm,
how would she have done that? Because all these bounties
yeah,
were done under a pseudonym.
yeah, the
So if
White
any of those
Fox.
people were left alive, they would know who she was. And this would cause a lot of problems for her in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Absolutely, Justy. And again, it just the pressure is on all the time in this story. And like it's like because of exactly what you just said there. Like there's just so many different things. Like how am I going to get rid of this really bad guy who killed the entire family of my adoptive daughter? She wants to kill him, and if she does, it's all going to go wrong. And then what? How do I keep my own daughter safe when she's trying to follow my footsteps? And what I do is super dangerous. And how do I also keep my business going? And how also do I pay off my debts? And how also do I just stay alive from the freaking shades? And just all
Mhm.
that is happening once, and this poor woman is like carrying the weight of the world on her own back, and she's not even superpowered. She's just a great, intelligent, patient, dangerous freaking woman, and and
Yeah.
I just love that. I love that. I
That's
think
another aspect that I really like about this story. I like it when I love it when a character has no powers in a universe where there are at least magic things happening, or other characters have magic powers. Like that's why I like this story, because there are these ghosts and she doesn't have magic powers to fight them. She has to find the right kind of weapons, and she has to be resourceful and use the right type of techniques. That's why my favorite Star Wars movie is Star Wars Rogue One. That
Rogue
one
One.
that's like the prequel to episode 4,
Yeah, Rogue
because
One.
it's all these characters without magic Jedi powers in a universe full of Jedi and people who have magic powers.
Mm. Absolutely, it's cool. It's a great idea. It's one of the reasons I love the character of Adeline in the Stormlight Archive. He's just an
Mm-hmm.
amazing character because he isn't one of the Knights Radiant, but he is just an absolute brilliant guy at what he does and really, really likable. Um, so, what did you think was the best sort of surprise, reversal, or plot move in the story as it progressed? What did you enjoy?
I don't know. I guess, oh, it's so hard to say in terms of the plot. I guess maybe the ending, because
Okay.
it's a little bit ambiguous in terms of what's going to happen next. But I don't know. There were a few pretty big and surprising twists in there too. It's hard to say. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Definitely the end where she
All right.
unleashes the shade of her grandmother, the one
That
who
was
had taught
pretty
her
awesome. That was
how
pretty
to be
awesome.
a bounty hunter.
Yeah.
Um, and she finally got, because this tax man was basically, he
The
was,
true villain.
yeah, he was not giving her really a choice. Like her choice was, oh, you got to pay me extra. I have this big tax on you. And if you don't do that, I'm going to take your land away. And
Yeah.
not only that, he alerted the fort men, and he was watching her stalk this bounty the whole time. So he was
Yeah.
fully expecting her to fail, and he
And
was after the land through
yeah.
nefarious means. And at the end, he got what was deserved of him, and he got attacked by the grandma shade, and
Hmm.
he
Yeah.
got withered and turned to. I guess they just kind of wither up and kind of turn into like a mummy or whatever
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
interesting how that happens.
They
That's
just call
always
it
another
withered.
interesting thing to me about what happens when you die, if you're some sort of magical creature, or if you get destroyed by some sort of magical enchanted item, or by some sort of magical enchanted creature, like how vampires turn to dust, or like that magic morning star that Belmont uses in Castlevania, Dusty, where
Hmm.
it makes the demons or vampires explode when it touches them.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. So yeah, that's
Well,
part of the magic system too. That's what I thought was really interesting. It's like, oh,
Hmm.
she and then she kind of remarked there must have been some type of familial like relation to that shade, that the shade didn't immediately try to destroy her. It
yeah.
looks like
Hmm.
it kind of targeted the tax man,
Theophilus.
and then she was able to kind of push her back into that little shrine
Yeah.
by using some silver. But I was like,
Well,
oh wow, that's a pretty cool twist ending.
it was. And like, yeah, like one that was one of the things I found interesting because when they suggest the guy who, like, for me, I call it progressive bad guys, right? Like at first, like the shades are the problem. Then it's like, oh, this guy is this person who they're going to kill. He's really bad. Like he murdered all of Sabruki's family. This guy's the bad guy. And then they kill Chesterton, and you're like, oh, they got him. They got the bad guy. And then the other good guys turn up, and you're like, oh, they're not good guys. They're going to make her give them her work and probably out her and ruin her a different way. So they're the bad guys. And then she kills all of them. And what they hold her daughter hostage to try and stop her killing them and to take the bounty and win it all over again. And then she is just about to solve that and reveal it all. And then this crossbow bolt comes from nowhere, which kills them, but of course sets off what? The shades. And you're like, who would do that? Who would risk that? And it's Theopolis. So not only is he holding her debt, but he's like, not only was I watching you, but I'm going to make sure you don't succeed. So she succeeds and is again ousted by another villain. Then she succeeds again, and another villain mucks her up, and she succeeds again, and then he mucks her up again. He's like, freaking stop messing with this woman. Like,
Yeah.
and like
That's why it's
and,
so exciting. It's so
yeah.
awesome to me when a hero has to face so many endless challenges. It's just relentless. It's just like, how the fuck are they even still standing? They just got endless willpower and discipline, and they're not going to get defeated no matter what happens to them.
Book 4 of The Expanse.
Yeah,
Well,
definitely.
don't tell me, dude. No
I'm
spoilers.
gonna tell you, it's just friggin' insane. That's
Yeah.
all I'm gonna say.
But you know what you just said there, Andrew, is exactly what Sansa is. That's exactly right. That's her superpower, is her willpower, her determination, her grit, her refusal to lie down and die. And I love the way that there's these escalating bad guys, and then the foreshadowing all comes to fruition, right? Like with Sabruki shooting things off at first, and then giving her the opportunity. And we knew there was a door that you weren't allowed to open in her house. She told us the old shrine was back there. We know it had silver around it, but none of us thought. Well, maybe you did, but I certainly didn't think. Oh, if the silver can keep them out, the silver could keep them in. Like, that did not even like remotely occur to me, because I thought about it as like shields to protect rather than shields to contain. So even though he told me all the clues, he didn't actually, like, I never sussed it. And that's one of the reasons I say that while it's also like a horror and a frontierman's tale, it's also a crime story, because at the end it's like who's actually setting her up? Who's the real villain here? And then you reveal the layers, and you're like, oh, it's this guy. Oh, it's this guy. Oh, it's this guy. Oh, it's Theopolis. And then you're like, oh, how's she going to get out of this? And then, of course, she reveals it. And then you think, oh, it's because it could have just been like, he could always just say, oh, and a shade just comes in and rips his face off. But the fact that he's given us all those clues, the fact that he's told us how things work, and then, of course, Theopolis, by trying to kill her, he slaps her, and he draws blood, because shades don't enrage unless there's blood. And so he draws blood, but he thinks he's safe because they're in the way stop, surrounded by 3 concentric rings of silver. So he's like, haha, I can do whatever I want to you here, bitch. And she's like, oh, can you? Guess what? I brought a shade. And she pulls open the door, which has the silver on it, releasing her grandmother. We knew her grandmother died. We knew she felt guilty about it. We knew that that she had a shrine in there that was like where her grandmother used to worship, that it was the old religion. All these clues. So actually, even though it's a crazy reveal, it's a reveal that has been effectively foreshadowed. Yes, I just said shadowed. Yes, that's right. I couldn't resist. And then one of the things that's really interesting, though, is then that's a great finale, right? But one of the things that is really good, with which is one of Sanderson's like things, is that his finale's epic, but then it hints at something more. Because, as Dusty mentioned, the shade seems to, like, it is her grandmother's shade. We know it is, but it should kill her too, right? And it doesn't.
Or at least try to kill her.
It doesn't even seem to try. It's very easily persuaded to go back in, and then she reseals it. And that suggests, for those of us who are Cosmere aware, that the shades are somehow not fully conscious cognitive shadows. And so that might mean that they have some of their previous cognitive aspect available and therefore can recognize, which suggests again what we might see in the being able to use the shades potentially as weapons or as
Yeah.
ways to have, like when Dusty talked about the Lord of the Rings story, where there's like this ranger and he uses the shade. I wonder if that would be it, because the if he ever does write another story, he said it will be either about or even called Dusk the Dusk Brigade. And I wonder if that will
Oh,
be a brigade that use shades as part of their fighting ability.
that would
But
be
we will
really
Hmm.
see.
cool.
It would be freaking cool if he ever gets to it. He's got a lot of Stormlight to write and a lot of
He sure does.
Mistborn to write. But the point is that the shades are dangerous, but the shades can go enraged with the rules. But one of the thing is mentioned but never explained. So presumably it will be explained if we ever do get the novel, which is the deepest ones. And the deepest ones are also shades, but they only come if the shades are already ticked off. So the thing that attracts them is normal shades going crazy when the shades go red eyes. And that, by the way, that's a cool visual graphic, isn't it? Like the shades have these green eyes when you see them, and then if they get ticked off, they go red. Like
Yeah,
that would look so good in a TV show, man. Just having the
definitely.
shades like floating in the background, and then suddenly there's some blood, and then you see all their eyes go red. Like
That would look cool, man.
it
Oh,
would. It would be really good, especially with some good sound effects behind it. Like whoever's doing the score
definitely.
could
It
really make
reminds
you
me of this
feel it.
that reminds me of this show I've been watching called Midnight Mass that has vampires in it, even though I didn't even have any idea there would be vampires in it just because I love horror movies and shows. And that's the when you see the vampires in a darkened area, their eyes are glowing green, which is interesting because usually you see the vampire's eyes growing red in movies and TV shows that you see them in that are more of the classic interpretation of vampires like that.
Hmm. Hmm.
Obviously, I love vampires.
And like, I really like, especially like old vampire stuff, where it's like people don't really know and it's very unsure if they're there, and like getting rid of them is really tricky, and there's multiple levels of things you have to go through, like got to stake
Hmm.
them and then chop off their head and then make sure it's 3 days or whatever, and like I love that kind
Yeah,
of gothic feel of vampires. I much
yeah.
prefer that the ones who shoot them with silver guns and light
Hmm.
grenades and stuff. I
I get
prefer
that. I get that
the
totally. Like even just Dracula, the original story and Dracula
oh,
himself as the original vampire. I love that too.
mm,
But I still love
yeah, it's good
newer
stuff.
depictions too. Like I
Yeah,
love Blade and
Blade. I knew
and
you were going to
also
mention Blade.
there's the yeah, and also there's a series that I've been mentioning to Dusty lately because I've been rereading the books, and there's a TV show based on the series. It's called The Strain. It's co-created by Guillermo del Toro, and it's a
Oh,
vampire series, and that's interesting too because it's actually kind of a scientific look at vampires as kind of just a virus trying to spread itself as much as possible, and they have the main character is a CDC investigator who looks at this transformation of a human to a vampire scientifically, and it gets really interesting after that.
cool.
But yeah,
Wow, sounds like
anyway.
sci-fi horror. 'Cause they're
Yeah.
they're introducing like scientific aspects of explaining vampirism.
Yeah, exactly. That's why it's interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, this definitely has vampire vibes a little bit, like the horror
Yeah,
element.
which is
I thought I was like when they were using silver, I was like, ah, I know he's borrowing this, from our other lore regarding monsters.
yeah.
But
Yeah,
he does
definitely.
Silver.
that very deliberately, right? Like Brandon Sanderson does
Hmm.
that absolutely deliberately because he wants us to relate these experiences on these crazy other planets to our own
Mhm.
reality, and to feel like these could be myths and legends that would work. And that's also, he does that with his pseudoscience as well, right? Like when he tries to link
Mhm.
his metals and all this jazz. He's obviously got like, he wants to just dip his toe and dip it
Hmm.
in. So he
I
takes a
didn't
cool
even
idea.
I didn't even think about that lately until I finally just recently started listening to Mistborn spoilers, and
Mhm.
I didn't even think until they mentioned it. I can't believe I didn't think about this before, that the metal-based magic system is obviously semi-based on alchemy, which
Yeah.
which totally makes sense in retrospect, and because that's basically the goal of alchemy, was that these different kinds of metals could allow you to have these specific enhanced magic abilities in some way.
Yep. And guess
Yeah.
what? And gold, the whole point of the Philosopher's Stone, which is a key thing in alchemy, would be that the Philosopher's Stone can turn lead into gold. And guess what else it does? Gives you in eternal life. And what does
Exactly.
gold? And what
Yeah.
does gold do? If you burn gold, it gives you health. For instance, and it's interesting in it. Like, yes, that's why. Like almost like that little hint of, oh, I'm gonna be a little clever with this because I'm freaking Brandon Sanderson. I can get away with it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. Yeah,
Ah,
totally.
yep. I love the guy. I have a proper. I adore him. He is just freaking amazing. My, my wife tells me, she said, if you ever go gay, I know who you're going to be going after. I'm like, yeah, shut up. I just, oh my goodness, he's just a legend. I just think his style really suits how I love to read.
So you don't go for the body then, eh? It's all like intellectual
Uh,
for you in terms of
well,
attraction.
I it hasn't been that way up to now, but hey, if we're stretching with it, just I just think he is a legend. Like if when they talk about setting up your idols, like he has become an idol to me. Like I don't know what will happen if he writes like a terrible book. I don't know like if I could like make myself say I don't like something he's written. I honestly don't know if that would be in me.
Well, it's kind of crazy that the first like televised thing that he's worked on is full of time. It's like, wow,
Yeah.
he has so much material.
And
Yeah,
I'm like,
it
he
could say
hasn't
it
got to
could
do his own
totally
stuff yet.
open up the door for direct Brandon Sanderson adaptations with the success of Wheel of Time, right? That would be so awesome to see, like a Mistborn adaptation. That would be my favorite one that I would want to see the most.
I think Brandon said that that's by far the most sort of televisual, strict to screen. He thinks Mistborn will work best, easiest. Um, I think in some ways, though, I think Elantris could be great. But
Hmm.
That would
I
be
think
good as like
Elantris works well.
a mini
A
series or
movie.
something like that. Yeah,
Uh, I think Elantris works well as a movie, a standalone,
yeah.
because you can cut quite a lot of it out. You can cut quite a lot of it out, and it's got like a zombie feel to it, which people will
Hmm.
like.
Hmm.
And it's also got like drawing the aeons is really visual, but you don't actually need to go into a lot of detail because the idea is you draw the aeon, it does its thing. So and it has one key plot point that runs through the story, and then it's like figure it out. When you figure it out, all this stuff kicks off, and it's just this big explosive ending, which really suits a movie. Stormlight Archive, it's just too much for a movie. It needs a
Hmm.
series. It
Yeah,
really needs a
definitely
series
series. That would be
for
cool to see a
sure.
Stormlight Archive series too, but obviously it'll be a long time before Brandon Sanderson has even done the book. So I would want to wait for a long time to see a series until the books are done, if I
but
had my choice. But I don't
but
know.
I know, and I think he'll be very careful with Stormlight. I think Stormlight's his baby, but I think he'd want other things to happen first to get his toes wet, get his experience, and make sure they're successful. But but actually, remember, Stormlight is two sets of five. So in 2 years,
Mhm.
we'll
Mhm.
have the first series finished. I know people keep talking about it like a 10-book series, but really it's 2 5-book series with completely
Mhm.
separate arcs. So you could absolutely do the first TV series like you did the first Lord of the Rings trilogy, and then do a different series like the Hobbit trilogy. Yes, they're linked, but they're clearly 2 complete sets. And I wish people would look at the Stormlight like that, as 2 complete sets rather than as one
Oh,
set.
yeah, that's a good
Just
point. Yeah. What
because they don't do it with
what would you
Mistborn.
want to, in terms of adaptations then, do you think that that it would be cool to see some like the start of a series adaptation after the first era of the books before the second era of the books come out potentially?
Or before they're complete for sure. And like I think it could be really good to do the first 5 books as maybe a 4 or 5 series. Okay, so 5 series, 5 years worth, and then a gap. Actors can go and do different things because not all of you are coming back. In fact, only very few of you are. And then come back, and in the back 5, I think several of them are going to be significantly older. Okay.
Mm.
And so that could be really cool because you could actually like pull across characters and actually have the actors be older and that be the right thing. Well, that'd be cool. And one of the things that's also cool about that, if it really panned out perfectly, is that some of the minor characters in the early books are major characters in the back books. And that would
Right.
be cool. Can you imagine like you get cast as like, you know, someone who only has a few, like Renarin or Lift, who have significant lines, kind of, but are nowhere near like the big plot runners. They get very little screen time, and then in the back 5, it's all about you. That would be
Mhm.
really cool. Like, wow. And you could get some young
Yeah.
actors who then can really flourish. But anyway, just some thoughts.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, what do you think about that in terms of Stormlight Archive adaptations, Dusty?
Well, they could probably just, Stormlight, what we're talking about a year or two maybe before the next book comes out.
Yep, 2
So,
years.
yeah, so if they wanted to start basically an adaptation, they could probably do it now if they wanted to. If they were trying to do a straight adaptation, that would be awesome. Um, oh, they would also need a huge budget.
Yeah.
That's why some
Just
people
thinking about
suggest.
it.
That's why some people suggest they just manga it.
But the
They say
first
That would be
book,
cool.
actually, I'm trying to
That
think
would
of the
be
first
cool.
book as far as like,
the Way of
because
Kings.
yeah, because in the books themselves, typically when we think of a lot of fantasy, there's a lot of travel, and there isn't actually a whole lot of travel in the first book. Because it's mostly, it's
Kaladin
the can't.
travels in the slave
Uh,
wagon, but yeah.
Not too much. Like it's
Well,
mostly revolves around the Bridge 4 stuff, and if we're talking about travel, it's not
yeah,
magnificent
just
city to magnificent city.
no.
It's
It's travel in a slave cage, and for Shalon, travel on the boats following Yasna. But most of
Yeah.
it is
yeah.
like a little bit of travel to a key place, and so they could even summarize that, couldn't they? To slave wagon, only like a tiny section, and at the same time, contrast that with Shalon on the boat. She's having a great time. He's having a crap time. She gets to Cabranth. He gets to the Shadow Plains, and then the main story kicks off from there. So you're right. It's not
Mm,
anywhere near like it's not Lord of the Rings or Wheel of Time. That's what you're saying, right? It defies the normal trope.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So I know, like, if you're talking about budgeting, when you have less
Mm.
settings, you have less money to
Ah,
spend.
I see what you're saying.
So,
Yep.
what do you guys think of in terms of whether they're like what it would be, what kind of adaptation it would be if one gets made for Shadows for Silence in the Forest of Hell? I think that could easily be a really cool movie.
Yeah.
Mm,
Self-contained, one shot, boom,
Yeah.
easy. Easy. You know what? I think this is going to be radical. I think if of all of them, I think this or the Emperor's Soul make the best stage play.
Oh, interesting.
Because think about how you can do that with sets, right? All you need is the way stop and the forest and the cave. That's it. So 3 sets, easy. You could things like having the door open for the shrine. You could totally do that. And shades, you could use wire work for the shades. You could have eyes in the back going green and red. It would be cool for a stage play. It would really work. It could be very atmospheric, very fun. You could have stage actors totally selling all of the dead drops, and you could even
If
like
that
murder people on stage.
if that ever happens, I should tell my brother to audition for that. That would be really
Whoa.
cool.
It would be
I'd also
creepy.
say one thing that could be utilized, like you don't always have to do full live action stuff. Like a
No?
very good route would be an anime adaptation.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
one
yeah,
of the things about
for sure.
those adaptations is the vast majority of them are one to one because you don't have to spend a boatload of money on special
Yeah,
effects and paying actors and things like that. Like
true.
like if you know any of these anime series, most of them are based off of print media,
Yeah,
and they pretty much follow their print media stories one to one. I know there's
yeah.
a few
There is
exceptions.
differences, and there's filler, but they're pretty good.
Yeah, outside of the filler, if you could always skip those episodes,
You really
which I
can.
sometimes do, but a lot of it does follow it pretty closely. There's some exceptions. Like I know the Full Metal Alchemist series, they actually made 2 separate series.
Yeah, I
One
know
that
that.
was,
Mm.
yeah, one that follows the original material strictly, and the one that took its liberties.
Oh, okay.
And there's also a movie adaptation as well. That's not very good.
Oh, yeah, I
It's a
heard that.
live action movie adaptation.
I've only seen like maybe a handful of episodes of Full Metal Alchemist, but what I watched of it seemed pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's a good show. I know some of the comedic stuff doesn't kind of falls flat because it's like weird cultural Japanese stuff that's not that funny. I
Hmm.
guess most of it revolves around like short jokes and stuff like that for the main character being kind of short and scrawny. But yeah, there's some pretty deep themes in that show, like the loss of children of a child and kind of trying to bring that child back through life by create like the very premise of the show is crazy. Like the 2 brothers tried to bring their mom back to life, and this caused a catastrophic thing to happen. Like one of the brothers lost his entire body. One of the other brothers lost like an arm because they're like the whole deal about alchemy is equivalent exchange. And the problem is, how do you make an exchange for a human soul? So they kind of
Right.
failed at that. They had the physical materials to create a human body, but they didn't have the essence to create a human soul. So that's why his brother's body was completely destroyed. And even when the brother's body was completely destroyed, they still failed at bringing their mother back to life. So like the premise of the show is pretty grim, at least
Hmm.
what actually the traumatic event that creates like the 2 characters in the show. Because you when you start the show, I think you start it right after that, and they kind of do flashbacks about what happened, like how did he lose his arm and how does brother become like a walking suit of armor with no body in
Right.
it.
Yeah, that was an interesting reveal in the first episode or two of the show or whenever it was.
Yeah, so it's some pretty dark themes, like how can you create um like what is the soul composed of? And they were naive kids and just thinking, oh, if you have the material contents of the body, then you're completely fine. But that's not the case. Like you cannot just create a soul out of nothing.
Yeah, that's a really interesting concept in itself. Like how do you create a soul, which is what the Emperor's soul is all about, right?
Yeah, similar, very similar thing. Like it's just a different take on that. And
Hmm.
then she's actually successful as the boys are completely unsuccessful, and they never actually succeed in doing that, from what I understand.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think they ultimately, like throughout the series, you begin to learn what it takes to create the soul, and what it takes to create the soul is completely horrific and unethical.
Okay.
Because that is their whole quest. Like even after their mishap, they're still questing to try and see if they can complete their original task. I know their original task is mostly, oh, how do I bring my brother's body back after they fail in that quest? Because he's completely guilty of, putting his brother into a piece of armor with no body. So it's an interesting. There's like some interesting philosophical concepts in that show that are pretty that are explored that are pretty interesting.
Yeah, all that
Anyway,
kind of stuff is really interesting for sure. All right. Yeah, we got off track with other fantasy stuff, fantasy type stuff again. But yeah, that's kind of interesting and related. It's somewhat related as well. But yeah, yeah, it was interesting how we got into adaptations there too.
hmm.
But yeah, anyway, this is a really cool story, and I think like it's just mainly all the fantasy horror aspects to me that are why this is my favorite story in the Arcanum Unbounded selection. And yeah, we talked about Emperor's Soul, of course, before, which is your favorite Tristram. So
Yep.
next time we'll talk about Dusty's
Six.
favorite story, which is Six of the Dusk. So yeah. So anything else you guys can think of before we end it there that you think was really cool or interesting in Shadows for Silence of the Forest of Hell?
No, I think it's that. Oh, by the way, I'm expecting Dusty's name for the next episode to be Sixth of the Dusty.
That's a great idea.
but uh, but no, I think like I said, I think this is an excellent story, like all of his stories. But the thing I think this one does best is the fact of it merging so many different story styles. As I said,
Mhm.
the family pressure under debt, the crime story, the um, the frontier story, and the horror aspect, and just the way that is blended. I think it's a masterclass of that. And for people who are looking to blend different styles into a single story, I think they could read this and learn a lot from it about how to do that without being clunky. Um,
Mhm.
and the real answer is make it part of a single character. It's Silence who actually brings all of it together. Um,
Mhm.
Certainly.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. This is one of the, like, I love this so much because this is one of the reasons that I love short stories as a medium, because you can have them center around one character and just have a really fast-paced plot and have many layers of things going on, and it's just constantly keeping your attention right up until the end, and that's why it can be so exciting. Like I like longer books too, of course, but I like them both for different reasons. The short stories do all that in the condensed format, and then the longer stories, they have more character development, world building, exploring what's happening with the world and the plot and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, that's why I love this short story, because it's kind of the epitome of a short story to me, and how fast paced it is and how you integrate all those different layers into the main theme of the plot that's happening, like we were talking about. Yeah, so anything else that you could think of there, Dusty, about that you think is significant about the story?
Well, I really like that it ended in a mixed success. So they did succeed, but at a cost. Like the daughter got physically maimed and she wasn't healed completely.
Hmm.
I thought it was interesting that it started from like it started with this one character which you thought was a simpleton, and then she actually relies on him at the end, and he was just like, "Oh, I've been listening the whole time. I know you're like bounty hunter, and I'll
Right.
help you. I'll help you uh, fence this. I'll keep your identity safe. I know you killed the dude. That usually does your bounty selling, but I'll do it for you."
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
and
that's
he
a
saves her life. He's the one who
Right.
actually poured the silver on her and saved her life. One of the coolest
mhm.
things we didn't mention actually is that she turns in one of the guys as she turns in the villain fox for the bounty that's on her, which I think is hilarious.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, those are both of what you guys just mentioned there really other very interesting aspects of what happens in the plot for sure.
Yeah,
All
and
right, well,
Kate Redding made me really hate
Yeah.
the tax collector. I
oh
was
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
just the way she read him, I was like, man, this guy is super annoying and sucks.
Yeah, yeah, she did a great job of making him sound that way. Yeah. All
All
right.
right,
Yeah, I know
Tristram's got to take off.
Yeah,
My
Tristram's
power is dead. My power is
power's
gone.
about to die.
It's
Okay.
bleeping. So
All right, thanks for talking, Tristram. Always fun. All right, thanks guys, and thanks Dusty. Always fun to talk nerd out about fantasy stories. So, yeah, for everyone watching. Look forward to our next chat on our next Arcanum Unbounded story, which will be Dusty's favorite story, as I mentioned, which is Six of the Dusk in Brandon Sanderson's Arcanum Unbounded collection of short stories in his Cosmere fantasy universe, and that's going to be on a different planet with its own individual magic system as well. And check out Dusty's chat on his channel that we're going to do tomorrow on that movie called The Wizard, which is a really ridiculously cheesy 80s movie about a kid who's really good at video games who runs away with his brother. And yeah, also,
California.
yeah. and and next week I think we were planning on you and I along with Chris and Shizan, are regular movie chat partners, finally talking about the Snyder cut of Justice League, the 4 hour long superhero movie, which is Zack Snyder's different edit, which is way better than the terrible theatrical edition of Justice League. So check that out too. And yeah, thanks to everyone for watching. Click that like button, share this everywhere, click the bell to be notified when I come out with new videos. And got a couple podcasts coming up. Going to be talking to Ben Burgess again soon, ideally about a few different topics, like how people have ridiculously been saying that Kant was a critical race theorist, which makes no sense. And Jordan Peterson's bizarre explanation of his belief in God and his new Beyond Order World Tour. And I'm sure we'll also talk about him rage quitting his job over wokeness recently, too. And I also wanted to talk about, I saw when the second last time Slavoj Žižek was on Ben Burgess's podcast, uh, he gave his criticism of Squid Game, which we talked about on here. So I wanted to talk about his criticism of Squid Game with Ben as well. So check out that. And yeah, check out that Justice League chat next weekend and the chat with Dusty tomorrow on The Wizard. And like I always say, I love you all. Keep being the tiny beam of light that shines through the almost impenetrable darkness in the universe. And most importantly, always remember this: the funk cures all, and groove is in the heart. And check out those other videos and check out all the stories in Arcanum Unbounded and all the other Brandon Sanderson stuff like Mistborn and Stormlight Archive. And yeah, anything else you want to say before we end it there, Dusty?
Not much. Just that I saw Ben recently. He was on Crystal Kyle and Friends.
Yeah, I haven't listened to that yet, but I was going to listen to that tonight.
Yeah, good. I listened to a little bit of it because I believe Kyle put a little clip on Secular Talk of
I saw
Ben
that clip.
Burgess.
I saw that clip, yeah.
Yeah, so haven't seen like the full interview, but I will eventually. I like Ben Burgess. He's a reasonable person.
Yeah, I like him too. He's one of my favorite lefties, and I appreciate that he's a philosopher too. So because I love philosophy, of course, as well.
Right, right.
So yeah, check that out, and yeah, check out that Crystal Kyle and Friends podcast too. I'm sure it's good, and check out his most recent episode. He did another one with Slavoj Žižek, who I love too, and I've also been doing a series on here that people can check out if they want on his book called Less Than Nothing, which is kind of about a bunch of random philosophical topics, but also majorly about Hegel. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so check those out as well. And yeah, so thanks again, Dusty. Thanks again, everyone, for watching. And check
Mm-hmm.
out future videos and check out Dusty's channel. And adios until next time, everyone.
All right.